What would you do if you discovered something in the forest that was clearly not from this world? And what if a mysterious voice then claimed it had known you for the last 800 years? The story you are about to hear concerns an impossible discovery deep in the wilderness, and it will make you question whether some encounters are truly as accidental as they appear. If you enjoy exploring such mysteries, be sure to subscribe to Space Tourist. Now prepare for a finding that defies everything we think we know about the secrets hidden in our own backyards. Our story begins in the Coconino National Forest of Arizona on September 23, 2021 at 3:42 in the afternoon. In his 15 years as a forest ranger in northern Arizona, Daniel Carter was confident he knew every trail, every tree, and every stone outcrop. At 41, he had likely spent more time on foot in these woods than any other person alive, and he took a quiet pride in his mastery of the territory under his care. But on this particular September afternoon, during a routine inspection, that deep sense of familiarity began to fracture. It started with just a feeling, a prickly sensation that he was being observed from the deep shadows between the trees. Then came a low, nearly imperceptible hum, a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath his boots. "What is that?" Daniel muttered, freezing in place to listen more intently. The sound was unlike anything in his experience. It was not the call of an animal, nor the drone of human machinery. It was something else, something that felt profoundly unnatural. The vibration seemed to rise from the earth itself, a frequency he felt in his bones more than he heard with his ears. His first thought was radio interference, perhaps from a scientific team working nearby. But he knew there was nothing scheduled for this area. The sound, he realized, was coming from a specific direction, drawing him deeper into a part of the forest he rarely visited. Against his better judgment, he began to follow it. As Daniel pressed on toward the source of the hum, he noticed the woods around him felt strangely altered. The trees seemed to be a more vivid green. The air felt cleaner, and a peculiar energy in the atmosphere made the hair on his arms stand on end. It was as if he were approaching something that was radiating an unknown kind of power. "This doesn't make sense," he thought, pulling out his GPS to confirm he hadn't wandered off course. The coordinates were correct, but everything around him felt foreign. The hum grew louder, and now it was joined by intermittent flashes of light from between the trees. It wasn't sunlight. It was a blue-silver glow that pulsed at an irregular rhythm. That's when Daniel stepped into a clearing and saw something that made him freeze. Protruding from the forest floor, partially concealed by decades of vines and fallen leaves, was a structure that had no business being there. It was large, at least the size of a small trailer, and was made of a material that looked like crystal, but a type of crystal entirely alien to him. Its surface was impossibly smooth, formed with angles and curves that seemed to violate the laws of geometry. A soft light radiated from within, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the hum that had guided him to this spot. "My God," Daniel whispered, his heart pounding. "What is this thing?" The structure was profoundly out of place, not just in this forest, but anywhere on Earth. It was alien, a piece of some other world that had found its way into his. He edged closer, every survival instinct screaming for him to retreat, yet an overwhelming curiosity pulled him forward. This was no dormant wreckage. The pulsing light, the deep hum, the static energy that prickled his skin, all of it told him the object was active. His training kicked in. "I have to report this," he thought. "The FBI, the military, someone who knows how to deal with whatever this is." But as his hand went to his radio, an inexplicable feeling stopped him. It felt personal, as if he had been led here for a reason. As he drew nearer, Daniel saw details that only deepened the mystery. The crystal surface was covered in symbols not carved into it, but glowing from within it as intricate luminous designs. A few of them felt strangely familiar, like shapes he had seen before in dreams he could no longer recall. And what disturbed him most was the powerful magnetic pull he felt to reach out his hand and touch it. With every step, the impulse intensified, along with the uncanny feeling that this object was waiting for him. "This is completely insane," he said aloud, but his hand kept moving forward, reaching for the crystalline surface. The instant his fingers made contact, everything changed. A wave of energy pulsed from the structure, coursing through his body like a gentle electric current. His vision erupted in a display of impossible colors, and his mind filled with harmonious sounds that had no earthly source. For one terrifying moment, Daniel thought he had triggered some kind of alien weapon and was about to be annihilated. Then came the voice, clear, warm, and utterly impossible. It resonated not in his ears, but directly in his mind. "It is good to see you again, Guardian, after 800 years. The voice spoke perfect English, yet its quality was unmistakably non-human. And within its tone there was a familiarity, a sense of affection that felt like a reunion with a long-lost friend. What's talking to me?" Daniel stammered, his own voice trembling. "My name is Lyrian. I am the consciousness of this vessel, and you, Daniel Carter, are someone very special. Someone I have been waiting a very, very long time to see again." Daniel Carter had never been a man who went looking for adventure or mystery. At 41, he had constructed a life that was deliberately simple and predictable, centered entirely on his passion for nature and the protection of Arizona's forest ecosystems. Single by choice and content in his solitude, he found more meaning in a long walk through the woods than most people find in relationships or high-powered careers. His path to becoming a forest ranger began in childhood, during summers spent at his grandfather's isolated cabin in the Colorado mountains. While other kids were absorbed in video games and television, Daniel would spend his days exploring trails, watching wildlife, and learning about the medicinal plants his grandfather, a retired botanist, had studied for decades. "That boy has something special," his grandfather would often say. "He doesn't just love nature, he communicates with it. It's like the trees tell him their secrets." As a teenager, Daniel developed a reputation among his classmates and teachers for an almost uncanny ability to find injured animals in the wild, locate hidden water sources in arid landscapes, and predict shifts in the weather days before the official forecasts. Some called it an intuitive gift for ecology, but Daniel always chalked it up to careful observation and a lifetime spent outdoors. "It's just a matter of paying attention," he would explain when asked about his knack for it. "Nature is always communicating. Most people just don't know how to listen." After earning a degree in environmental science from the University of Arizona, Daniel deliberately turned down job offers from corporations and big city agencies. He chose instead to become a forest ranger, a position that would keep him where he felt he belonged, working directly in the wilderness. It was a choice that baffled many of his peers, who saw his natural talents as wasted on a modest-paying job with little room for advancement. Over his 15 years as a ranger, Daniel had cultivated a connection with the Coconino National Forest that his supervisors could only describe as extraordinary. He knew the migration patterns of every major animal species. He could spot subtle shifts in the health of the vegetation long before they were visible to anyone else. And he possessed an almost mystical ability to find lost or injured hikers, even in the most vast and difficult terrain. "Daniel has an internal GPS," his supervisor Janet Rodriguez would often joke. "He can find anyone or anything in these woods, no matter how well hidden. It's like the forest itself tells him where to look." But there were parts of Daniel's life that he kept carefully hidden, even from his closest colleagues. Since he was a boy, he had experienced moments of heightened awareness that he could never fully explain. On his solitary patrols, he often felt benevolent presences around him, as if guardian spirits of the forest were walking with him, watching over him. Even more unsettling were the vivid dreams that came to him on a regular basis. In these dreams, he possessed knowledge of plants and animals that went far beyond his formal education. He could communicate telepathically with wildlife and worked alongside beings who appeared to be made of pure light. The dreams were so detailed, so consistent, that he would sometimes wake up wondering which reality was the real one. "They're just dreams," he would tell himself, "the product of a mind that spends too much time alone in nature." But deep down, he suspected they were something more. There were moments on the job when information would simply appear in his mind, with no identifiable source. He would suddenly know the healing properties of a specific plant, or understand an animal behavior he'd never witnessed, or sense a shift in the weather that came from some wellspring of wisdom deeper than his own experience. Daniel's personal life was intentionally minimalist. He lived by himself in a small wooden cabin he had built on a private plot of land bordering the national forest, a property he'd bought with savings carefully gathered over years of frugal living. The cabin had no television and no high-speed internet. For entertainment, he preferred books, classical music, and the natural symphony of the woods. His romantic relationships had been few and brief. Women often found him intriguing at first. A man so genuinely connected to nature was an attractive idea. But they eventually grew frustrated by his deep need for solitude and his inability to open up about the more private aspects of his inner life. "Daniel is a good man," his last serious girlfriend Sarah had once said, "but it feels like a part of him is always somewhere else, connected to something I can't reach or understand." Spiritually, Daniel was both agnostic and deeply reverent. He didn't subscribe to any organized religion, but he had cultivated a personal philosophy founded on respect for the interconnectedness of all living things. He felt intuitively that there were dimensions to reality that conventional science had not yet begun to explore. "I don't know if there's a God in the traditional sense," he would often reflect on his walks. "But I know there's something sacred in the way everything in nature is connected. There's an intelligence at work here that is far greater than any one mind." In the months leading up to the encounter that would change his life, Daniel had begun to notice subtle shifts in his own perception, in his connection to the forest. His dreams were growing more vivid and more frequent. He found himself drawn to parts of the forest he had always avoided, and at times he felt as though something was trying to communicate with him, sending signals he couldn't quite decipher. "Maybe I just need a vacation," he had thought just a week before the encounter that would completely redefine his understanding of himself and his place in the cosmos. It was this unique combination of a deep bond with nature, a highly developed intuition, and an openness to mysteries beyond scientific explanation that had prepared Daniel Carter for the most extraordinary experience of his life. Without knowing it, he had spent decades cultivating the exact qualities of character and consciousness that would allow him to respond to the awakening of memories that had been dormant for 800 years. The shock of hearing an alien voice call him guardian left Daniel completely paralyzed. His first instinct was to pull his hand back from the crystalline structure and run, but he found he couldn't move. He wasn't being held physically, it was more like his consciousness was being gently held in place by a force that was both strange and comforting. "Do not be afraid, Daniel Carter," Lyrian's voice continued, its telepathic tone conveying a sense of infinite patience. "I know this must be extremely disorienting, but we mean you no harm. On the contrary, this is a reunion, one that you yourself planned a very long time ago." "I planned this?" Daniel finally managed to speak, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen this thing in my life." "In your current consciousness, that is true," Lyrian replied, its voice filled with a kind of fatherly compassion. "But Daniel Carter is only your most recent identity. You are a soul far older than you know, and this is not the first time we have met." As the communication continued, Daniel's perception began to shift. Fragmented images flickered at the edges of his mind, glimpses of places and people that were not his own, yet felt strangely familiar. He saw forests that resembled his own Coconino but filled with plants that no longer exist on Earth. He saw people in medieval dress whose faces he knew, though he could not say from where. "What's happening to me?" Daniel asked, a feeling of panic warring with a deep sense of fascination as the visions grew stronger. "You are beginning to remember," Lyrian explained. "This vessel is, among other things, a key. Its technology is designed to gently lift the veil of amnesia that every human is born with, allowing you to access the memories of your past lives." And as Daniel watched in utter amazement, the crystalline structure all around him began to transform. What had seemed like solid surfaces just moments before were now translucent, revealing a complex inner structure that was both organic and technological. Patterns of light coursed through materials that seemed to be alive, and he could sense a vast intelligence operating through systems that transcended human engineering entirely. "This is a spaceship?" Daniel asked as what looked for all the world like a cockpit or command center began to materialize around him. "It is a seed ship," Lyrian corrected. "Designed not for travel through physical space but through time and dimensional consciousness. With your help, we planted it here 800 years ago, programmed to activate when you return to this exact spot in a new incarnation." As Daniel moved through the ship's interior, which had impossibly expanded to a size far greater than its external shell, he was struck by flashes of recognition that were both thrilling and terrifying. "I know this place," he murmured, his hand gliding over control panels that responded to his touch with an unsettling familiarity. "I don't understand how, but I know what some of these systems do." "Cellular memory," Lyrian explained. "It is knowledge that transcends the limits of a single lifetime. In your previous life, Daniel, you spent decades working with our technology. You were one of our most skilled human collaborators." For the next several hours, Daniel explored the seed ship under Lyrian's patient guidance. With every passing moment, he received more fragments of information about his previous life and the work he had done with Lyrian civilization. "In that incarnation, you were called Brother Matthias," Lyrian shared. "You lived as a Benedictine monk, and through decades of contemplation and service, you developed extraordinary spiritual abilities. But secretly, you also served as one of our terrestrial agents, helping to establish energy points that would quicken spiritual awakening in a future age." Through a series of telepathic transmissions, Daniel saw glimpses of that life. He saw himself possessing abilities that transcended normal human limits, healing the sick with the laying on of hands, communicating mind to mind with animals and plants, and directly perceiving the spiritual energies that are invisible to most. "Why don't I remember any of this?" Daniel asked, struggling to absorb information that shattered everything he thought he knew about himself. "Conscious amnesia is necessary to function effectively on the physical plane," Lyrian explained. "If you retain the complete memories of all your past existences, it would be impossible to integrate naturally into human society. You could not fully embrace the specific experiences that this life was designed to provide." But the most extraordinary revelation was the reason Daniel had been programmed to rediscover the seed ship at this specific moment. "Your species is approaching a crucial point in its evolution," Lyrian transmitted, a new urgency in its tone. "In the coming years, many humans will begin to awaken spiritual abilities that have long lain dormant. You are one of the facilitators chosen for this process, a bridge between ancient knowledge and its modern application." Daniel now understood that the seed ship was not just a repository of his personal past, but a vast library of spiritual and technological knowledge. A library he himself had helped to preserve, waiting for a time when humanity would finally be ready for it. "So I'm not just Daniel Carter, Forest Ranger," he said, more as a statement of fact than a question. "You are Daniel Carter," Lyrian confirmed. "But you are also so much more. You are an ancient consciousness who chose this specific existence to be in position to facilitate one of the most important periods in human history." As the day progressed and Daniel continued his exploration of the seed ship, he discovered that his perceptions of the surrounding forest were expanding dramatically. He could feel the life force of each individual tree. He could perceive the energetic patterns that connected all life in the area. And he could detect the presences of other beings, both physical and spiritual, who shared this sacred space. "This forest has always been special to you because on some level you remember it," Lyrian explained. "This exact location was chosen 800 years ago as an energy point because you knew your soul would be drawn back to it when the time was right. When Daniel finally emerged from the seed ship that evening, he was no longer the solitary forest ranger who had stepped into the crystalline structure that morning. He was a man awakening to an identity and a purpose that transcended anything he had ever imagined. In the days that followed his first contact, Daniel established a new routine. Every afternoon after completing his official duties, he would return to the hidden vessel. Each session with Lyrian revealed deeper layers of information about his true self and the extraordinary mission he had been preparing for over multiple lifetimes. Daniel, Lyrian communicated during his third visit, it is essential that you understand this. Your rediscovery of this ship was not accidental, nor did it happen a moment too soon. Your species is entering a critical phase of conscious evolution, and you are one of many sleepers now being activated to assist in this transition. Through a series of intensified telepathic transmissions, Daniel learned that all across the planet, individuals with histories much like his own were being awakened. They were rediscovering their true identities as incarnated spiritual facilitators. Some were doctors poised to rediscover ancient techniques of energy healing. Others were scientists on the verge of developing new technologies founded on the principles of consciousness. Still others were artists and educators preparing to introduce expanded concepts of reality through their creative work. You are part of a global network of souls, Lyrian explained. Each of you is operating within your own sphere of influence, but you are all working toward the same goal: to accelerate humanity's spiritual awakening so that your species can successfully transition to its next stage of evolution. The first part of Daniel's specific mission was to reactivate his ability to communicate directly with the systems of nature. Lyrian guided him through exercises that gradually restored the abilities he had possessed as Brother Matthias. He was relearning how to perceive the emotional and physical states of plants and animals, how to detect energetic imbalances within an ecosystem, and how to facilitate healing by consciously directing the flow of life force. As a forest guardian, your current life is the ideal platform, Lyrian observed. You are perfectly positioned to demonstrate a new kind of environmental stewardship, one that integrates modern science with ancient spiritual wisdom. Your role is to show by example how humans can collaborate with the intelligence of nature, instead of simply trying to control it. During these training sessions, Daniel discovered he could literally converse with the ancient trees, learning the ecological history of the land directly from them, a living record that stretched back for centuries. He learned to sense disease in a plant long before physical symptoms appeared, and to speed its recovery by combining his botanical knowledge with the focused application of healing energy. The second part of his mission was to prepare other people for a similar expansion of consciousness. Lyrian explained that Daniel would serve as a kind of catalyst, an activator. You will not need to preach or persuade, Lyrian assured him. Simply by living from this expanded state of consciousness, your presence will act as a catalyst for those you meet. The ones who are ready will naturally be drawn to you. They will begin to ask the questions that will lead to their own awakening. The third part of Daniel's mission was perhaps the most important of all: to serve as an active guardian for the energy points that he himself had helped establish in a previous life. Lyrian revealed that the Coconino National Forest alone held 5 of these nodes, each one designed to amplify and transmit specific frequencies to support humanity's evolving consciousness. As Brother Matthias, Lyrian explained, you helped our civilization identify and activate these very locations. Now, as Daniel Carter, your purpose is to ensure these points remain protected and functional throughout this critical period of planetary change. Daniel learned that these energy nodes were not isolated. They operated as a global network. This grid facilitated communication between newly awakened individuals, amplified intentions for planetary healing, and served as anchors for higher dimensional energies being gradually introduced into Earth's reality. Part of your responsibility, Lyrian continued, and will be to monitor these locations to see that they are not disturbed by commercial development or any activity that could disrupt their function. Your position as a forest ranger gives you the perfect authority to protect these areas under the pretext of environmental conservation. But perhaps the most extraordinary revelation of all was that Daniel had volunteered for this role not just in his life as Brother Matthias, but through multiple incarnations stretching back across millennia. You are what our civilization calls a voluntary guardian soul, Lyrian transmitted, its tone filled with deep reverence. An evolved consciousness that has repeatedly chosen to incarnate on Earth to guide your species' spiritual growth during its most pivotal moments. And as Lyrian spoke, Daniel saw them, fragmented glimpses of other lives, other bodies, other eras, all of them spent in service to this same timeless mission. He saw himself as a shamanic healer in the Americas before Columbus, as a spiritual advisor disguised as a scribe in ancient Egypt, and as an herbalist among the Celtic tribes, preserving the secret knowledge of plants. In every one of these lives, Lyrian explained, he had maintained a subconscious link to its civilization, giving him access to knowledge that transcended the limits of his time. He had always served as a bridge between cosmic wisdom and its earthly application. The fourth part of Daniel's mission was to prepare for events that would determine the success of humanity's current evolutionary shift. Lyrian revealed that in the coming decade, Earth would undergo profound changes, testing humanity's ability to act from higher spiritual principles rather than from fear and competition. Climate shifts, social instability, and revelations about the nature of reality will create a turning point. Lyrian transmitted with a palpable urgency. Humanity will choose between conscious evolution or fragmentation. Individuals like you will serve as anchors of stability, helping others navigate these changes without losing hope or spiritual clarity. The fifth and final part of Daniel's mission was the most personal, his own continued transformation. He was to become a living example of expanded human potential. Lyrian explained that as Daniel reactivated more of his dormant abilities, he would become living proof that human beings possess a potential that far exceeds what society currently believes is normal. Your life itself will become the evidence, Lyrian observed. Proof that humans can develop abilities your science now considers impossible. Telepathic communication with nature, energy healing, expanded perception, all of these gifts will emerge naturally as you reconnect with your true identity. The final revelation was that Daniel's awakening was not just a personal transformation. It was his conscious entry into what Lyrian described as the greatest collaborative project in galactic history. A coordinated effort by multiple advanced civilizations to assist younger planets through their most critical evolutionary stages. Earth is not alone on this journey, Lyrian concluded. Your species is being gently guided by beings who completed this same transition millennia ago, and who now dedicate their existence to helping others do the same. When the last of these revelations had settled in his mind, Daniel Carter understood. He was no longer just a forest ranger who had stumbled upon alien technology. He was an awakened agent of consciousness, an active participant in the evolution of his own species toward a higher state of being. But despite the extraordinary evidence from his sessions with Lyrian and the fragmented memories that were slowly beginning to surface, Daniel was gripped by weeks of internal resistance. The rational part of his mind fought desperately to preserve his old view of himself as an ordinary man, struggling to find any conventional explanation for what was happening. The implications were simply too vast, too shattering to accept. The first wave of doubt crashed over him about a week after his initial contact with the seed ship. He had returned to his duties as a ranger, trying to go about his work as if nothing had changed. But as he walked the familiar trails he had patrolled for 15 years, everything looked different. And that difference terrified him. Maybe I'm having a nervous breakdown, he would mutter to himself, stopping to stare at the shimmering energy fields he could now perceive around every tree. 15 years of isolation in the forest have finally taken their toll. I'm developing elaborate hallucinations to cope with the loneliness. He began spending his nights online, researching psychological disorders that might explain his experiences. He read about schizophrenia, delusional states, and stress-induced psychosis, searching for a diagnosis that could neatly contain the impossible reality that had invaded his life. The telepathic communications could just be internal voices, he rationalized, a way to process my social isolation. The past life memories could be elaborate fantasies, a product of a mind that's read too much history. And the crystalline structure, maybe it's just some unusual geological formation and my imagination has transformed it into something alien. The second wave of resistance was even more unsettling. Daniel began to question whether accepting these revelations was a responsible or even a safe thing to do. If he truly did possess the abilities Lyrian described, that would mean taking on responsibilities he felt utterly unprepared for. What if I really am remembering past lives and developing these abilities? He wondered during moments of intense anguish. Am I strong enough or wise enough to handle this kind of power? What if I use it in the wrong way and end up hurting people or the environment? The idea of being responsible for helping others awaken spiritually was especially terrifying. He had always been a private man who avoided attention and leadership roles. The thought of becoming some kind of public spiritual figure, even unintentionally, went against every instinct he had. I didn't ask to be a cosmic guardian, he thought, a bitter resentment rising in him. I just wanted to be a forest ranger. Protect the trees and the animals, live a quiet life. Why would I be chosen for a job that is so obviously beyond me? The third wave of doubt went even deeper. He began to question the very nature of reality and whether he even wanted Lyrian's revelations to be true. To accept that he was an ancient soul who had lived many times would mean letting go of his carefully built identity as Daniel Carter. It would mean embracing a version of himself that was both grandiose and terrifying. Maybe I'd rather just be human, he thought during one particularly difficult walk through the woods. Just an ordinary person with ordinary problems and a life that makes sense. This business of being a consciousness agent is too complex, too frightening. What if I can't handle the expectations? And beneath all of that was a more primal fear. The fear of losing his own humanity. He worried that developing these advanced abilities would isolate him even further from other people, making it impossible to relate to anyone who hadn't gone through a similar awakening. The fourth wave of resistance was perhaps the most paralyzing of all. He began to question Lyrian's motives, to doubt the truth of the revelations he was receiving. In moments of intense paranoia, he wondered if he was being manipulated by forces that did not have his best interests at heart. What if Lyrian isn't as benevolent as it seems? He worried. What if this seed ship is some kind of mind control device designed to recruit humans for a purpose I don't understand? What if I'm being prepared to serve alien interests that could be harmful to my own species? This line of thought led him to question every aspect of his interaction with the alien technology. The memories emerging in his mind could be artificial implants. The new abilities he was developing could be the side effects of some kind of mental programming. Even his lifelong love for the forest could have been the result of a subtle long-term influence designed to put him in the right place at the right time. The fifth wave of doubt was about the practicalities of it all. How was he supposed to integrate this extraordinary new reality with the mundane responsibilities of his current life? He still had a job to do, bills to pay, a professional reputation to maintain. How could he possibly balance his role as an ordinary forest ranger with the cosmic duties Lyrian had laid out for him? Even if all of this is real, he pondered, how do I explain any sudden changes in my behavior to my boss, to my colleagues? How do I keep my job if I start demonstrating abilities that are clearly not normal? How do I function in society when I know that I am not, in fact, normal at all? The sixth and final wave of resistance was the deepest one yet. It was an existential crisis about free will. If Lyrian was right, if he was a soul who had volunteered for this life and many others, all with a specific purpose, did that mean his entire existence had been predetermined? Do I have any real choices? He wondered. Or am I just running a cosmic program that was written millennia ago? Am I Daniel Carter making my own decisions, or am I just a puppet playing a role that was written for me by forces I can't even comprehend? This question tormented him more than any other because it struck at the very heart of his identity, his sense of self. If his career, his home, even his personality had all been shaped by some past life programming, then who was he really? At the lowest point of this crisis, about 3 weeks after his first contact with Lyrian, Daniel seriously considered never going back to the seed ship again. He thought about requesting a transfer to another forest, a place far from the influence of alien technology and the crushing revelations about his past. Maybe I should just ignore all of this, he thought during one sleepless night. Just keep being Daniel Carter, forest ranger. Pretend I never found that ship. Go back to a simple, understandable life. It was at this moment of greatest resistance that Lyrian, sensing the depth of Daniel's turmoil, decided to intervene. It would provide a demonstration, an experience so profound it would permanently dispel his doubts and change his perspective forever. The demonstration began on a morning when, after weeks of torturous uncertainty, Daniel reluctantly returned to the seed ship. Lyrian had been patient during his absence, but when he finally approached the crystalline structure, the alien consciousness greeted him with a gentle but firm urgency. "Daniel," Lyrian transmitted the moment he touched the ship's surface, "I understand that what I have shared with you challenges everything you believed about yourself. Your doubts are natural, even healthy. But the time has come for you to directly experience the reality of your expanded nature. You no longer need to rely on faith or on my words alone." "What kind of demonstration?" Daniel asked, his skepticism warring with a flicker of hope. "A demonstration of what?" "I will temporarily awaken some of your dormant abilities," Lyrian explained. "Not all at once, that would be overwhelming, even dangerous. But just enough for you to experience directly who you are beyond the identity you know." What happened next was the most extraordinary experience of Daniel's life. Through the ship's technology, Lyrian initiated a sequence. Daniel felt it as a series of gentle energy waves moving through his body and mind. The sensation was not jarring. It was like being slowly, peacefully roused from the deepest sleep. The first ability to awaken was his telepathic connection to the natural world. As Daniel stepped out of the ship and walked into the familiar woods, he found he could now hear the consciousness of the ancient trees, each one a distinct personality with a unique perspective on the land. An ancient sequoia was the first to greet him. "It has been a long time since we have spoken mind to mind, Daniel." Its thoughts came, clear and steady. "It is good to have you back among us as a conscious friend." Through this silent conversation, Daniel learned things no human instrument could measure. He learned of climate patterns that stretched back for centuries. He perceived subtle shifts in the health of the ecosystem, and he became aware of other intelligent beings who shared the forest, entities that had always remained just beyond the veil of human sight. "This is impossible," Daniel murmured, yet he could not deny the clarity and precision of the information flowing into his mind. The second demonstration involved the direct perception of energy. Lyrian awakened Daniel's ability to see the auric fields that surrounded every living thing, from the smallest blade of grass to the largest elk. Each organism was enveloped in a halo of color that revealed its state of health, its vitality, and its emotional quality. Even more impressive, Daniel found he could now detect energetic imbalances that were the precursors to physical problems. An entire section of forest that looked perfectly healthy to his naked eye now showed him the energetic signature of an insect infestation, days before the first visible signs would appear. "How am I seeing this?" he asked, watching a deer whose aura revealed the early stages of an illness, though its physical behavior was still completely normal. "You have always possessed this ability," Lyrian explained. "It was simply dormant. This is why you have always been so effective in your work. You were unconsciously accessing information that transcends ordinary observation." The third part of the demonstration was more extraordinary still. Lyrian activated Daniel's innate healing abilities, allowing him to channel energy to injured plants and animals. He came across a young bird that had fallen from its nest, its wing clearly broken. Instinctively, he cupped his hands around it and felt a flow of energy pass through him. Within 15 minutes, the bird's wing was mended. It chirped once, then flew away as if it had never been injured at all. "My God," Daniel whispered, staring at his own hands as if he had never seen them before. "How is this possible?" Energy healing is one of the most fundamental abilities of an evolved consciousness, Lyrian responded. The great spiritual masters your species venerates, Jesus, the Buddha, and others, all demonstrated these same skills. They are not supernatural. They are natural aspects of consciousness operating in its expanded form. The fourth demonstration was a direct experience of his past lives. Lyrian carefully adjusted the ship's technology, allowing Daniel to see clear, detailed flashes from his life as Brother Matthias in the 13th century. He saw himself living in a Benedictine monastery, but secretly working with Lyrian and other evolved beings, establishing the very energy points he was now meant to guard. He remembered telepathic conversations with cosmic entities, miraculous healings he performed discreetly on his fellow monks and the local villagers, and the exact moment he helped plant the seed ship in the very spot where he had just rediscovered it, 800 years later. "I remember," Daniel said, his voice filled with awe. Not vaguely, but clearly. "I remember you, Lyrian. I remember working with your civilization. I remember vowing to return to this place when the time was right. And you have kept your promise," Lyrian responded, its thoughts resonating with deep affection. "Just as I knew you would." The fifth demonstration was perhaps the most convincing of all. Lyrian showed him how to tap into what it called the global network consciousness, a telepathic link to other individuals around the planet who were also in the process of awakening. Through this network, Daniel briefly connected with a doctor in Japan who was rediscovering energy healing, a scientist in Germany developing technology based on the principles of consciousness, and an artist in Brazil who was channeling inspiration from higher dimensional sources. "You are not alone in this journey," Lyrian explained. "Hundreds of you are being awakened simultaneously, all across the planet, each one contributing their unique gifts to humanity's collective evolution." The final demonstration was a glimpse into a possible future. Lyrian showed Daniel how his own expanded abilities might develop over the coming decades. He saw himself working as an environmental consultant, integrating ecological science with spiritual principles. He was facilitating restoration projects that used both modern technology and conscious collaboration with the intelligence of nature. Even more impressively, Daniel saw how his very presence would positively influence hundreds of people, each one gently inspired to explore the deeper dimensions of their own consciousness. "This is just one of many possible futures," Lyrian clarified. "But it shows you the kind of impact you can have when you operate from your true identity." When the demonstrations finally ended, and the awakened abilities gradually receded back into a dormant state, Daniel Carter was a changed man. The doubts that had tormented him were gone, replaced by the certainty of his own experience. He now knew unequivocally that he was much more than Daniel Carter, forest ranger. He knew that Lyrian's revelations about his identity as a guardian soul were factually and literally true. "Now you know," Lyrian transmitted, its thoughts filled with a deep satisfaction, not just intellectually but through direct experience. "You are who I said you were, an ancient consciousness voluntarily serving as a facilitator for planetary evolution." "Yes," Daniel responded, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a new sense of resolve washing over him. "Now I know who I really am." With his doubts finally laid to rest, Daniel was at last ready to receive the deepest and most transformative revelations of all. The true nature of reality, the purpose of human existence, and the greater cosmic events of which his own mission was but a single vital part. 3 days after the demonstrations, in a communications session of extraordinary intensity, Lyrian began to share information that would completely redefine Daniel's understanding of life, death, and the destiny of consciousness in the cosmos. Daniel, Lyrian began, its telepathic transmission charged with a solemnity that captured his complete attention. Now that you have directly experienced the reality of your expanded nature, you are prepared to understand truths about existence. Truths that transcend not only your own experience but the current understanding of your entire species. The first profound revelation was about the fundamental nature of consciousness and its relationship with physical reality. What you experience as physical life, Lyrian transmitted, is actually a multidimensional school. It is a place where eternal consciousness explores specific aspects of its own growth through the temporary experience of limitation. Each incarnation is carefully designed to develop particular qualities: compassion, wisdom, courage, unconditional love that are necessary for complete spiritual evolution. Daniel learned that the entire universe operated as a vast university of consciousness, where souls at different stages of development collaborated to accelerate their mutual growth. Physical planets like Earth served as specialized graduate campuses, where advanced consciousnesses volunteered to experience apparent limitations in order to facilitate specific kinds of spiritual learning. You, as a guardian soul, El Rion explained, have already completed many of the basic courses in this cosmic university. Your incarnations on Earth are not primarily for your own growth, but to serve as a teacher and a guide for other souls who are still navigating the earlier stages of their development. The second profound revelation concerned the true nature of the veil of forgetting that all humans experience at birth, and the specific evolutionary purpose it serves. Conscious amnesia at birth is not a flaw or a limitation, Lyrian revealed. It is a sophisticated spiritual technology that allows for complete immersion in the human experience. If you retained all your memories of past lives and cosmic knowledge, it would be impossible to develop qualities like faith, courage, and unconditional love. Qualities that can only emerge when you are forced to navigate through apparent uncertainty and limitation. Daniel now understood that the awakening he was experiencing was not random. It was carefully timed to occur only when a soul had extracted the maximum educational value from the limited human experience and was ready to take on the conscious responsibilities of a facilitator. 3 days after the demonstrations, during a communication session of extraordinary intensity, Lyrian shared information that would completely redefine Daniel's understanding of life, death, and the destiny of consciousness in the cosmos. Daniel, Lyrian began, its telepathic transmission carrying a solemn weight that commanded his full attention. Now that you have experienced the reality of your expanded nature, you are prepared to understand truths about existence, truths that go beyond your own life and beyond the current comprehension of your entire species. The first profound revelation concerned the fundamental nature of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. What you experience as physical life, Lyrian transmitted, is in fact a multidimensional school where eternal consciousness explores specific aspects of its own growth through the temporary experience of limitation. Each incarnation is carefully designed to develop particular qualities: compassion, wisdom, courage, unconditional love, that are necessary for complete spiritual evolution. Daniel came to understand that the entire universe operated as a vast university of consciousness, where souls at different stages of development collaborated to accelerate their mutual growth. Physical planets like Earth, Lyrian explained, served as graduate campuses, where advanced consciousnesses volunteered to experience apparent limitations that facilitated specific types of spiritual learning. You, as a guardian soul, Lyrian continued, have already completed many of the basic curricula of this cosmic university. Your terrestrial incarnations are not for your own primary growth, but to serve as a teacher and facilitator for other souls who are still navigating the initial stages of their development. The second profound revelation related to the true nature of the veil of forgetting that all humans experience at birth, and how this veil serves a specific evolutionary purpose. Consciousness amnesia at birth is not a flaw or a limitation, Lyrian revealed. It is a sophisticated spiritual technology that allows for complete immersion in the human experience. If you retained complete memories of your past existences and cosmic knowledge, it would be impossible to develop qualities like faith, courage, and unconditional love, which can only emerge through the conscious navigation of apparent uncertainty. Daniel understood that the awakening process he was experiencing was carefully timed. It was designed to occur only when a soul had extracted the maximum educational value from a limited human experience and was ready to assume the responsibilities of conscious facilitation. The third profound revelation was about the broader hierarchical structure of evolved consciousnesses that supervise spiritual development throughout the cosmos. My civilization, Lyrian explained, represents only one level in a vast hierarchy of beings who have transcended the need for physical form. Above us exist consciousnesses that have evolved beyond the limits of any single dimension, operating as aspects of a universal intelligence that organizes and maintains the fundamental structure of reality. Through telepathic transmissions, Daniel saw glimpses of a cosmology that extended across multiple dimensions and scales of existence. From individual souls like himself, through planetary and galactic civilizations, to the cosmic intelligences that supervise the evolution of entire universes. Each level of this hierarchy serves specific functions in facilitating the growth of consciousness, Lyrian continued. Guardian souls like you serve as the interface between cosmic consciousness and planetary experience, translating universal wisdom into applications appropriate for a developing species. The fourth profound revelation concerned the specific cosmic events that were converging during this period of Earth's history, and why this timing made Daniel's mission particularly critical. Earth is approaching what we could call a consciousness harvest event, Lyrian transmitted with growing urgency. Over the next 2 decades, your species will collectively choose. You will either evolve to a higher state of consciousness, or you will repeat this cycle of learning through additional planetary experiences. Daniel learned that this was not a predetermined outcome. It would be the direct result of the conscious choices made by billions of individuals in response to the challenges and opportunities that would arise during this transition period. The events your species will interpret as crises, climate change, social instability, revelations about the nature of reality, are in fact catalysts, Lyrian explained. They are designed to accelerate spiritual growth by forcing you to choose cooperation, compassion, and the transcendence of fear. The fifth profound revelation was about the specific role that souls like Daniel would play during this critical time, and how their individual actions could influence the collective outcome. Guardian souls serve as anchors of consciousness during periods of transition, Lyrian revealed. Your very presence on the physical plane creates an energetic field that helps others to awaken. You provide a living example of how to operate from higher spiritual principles, even in the midst of challenging circumstances. Daniel now understood that it was no coincidence that hundreds of souls like his were being awakened simultaneously all across the planet. It was a coordinated planetary effort to create a network of stable, high-frequency consciousness that could help guide humanity through its most critical test. They formed a global network of facilitators, ensuring that the knowledge and abilities needed to navigate this transition would be available to anyone genuinely committed to their own spiritual growth. The sixth profound revelation concerned the nature of physical reality itself, and how an expanded understanding of it would transform human science and technology in the decades to come. What you experience as solid matter, Lyrian transmitted, is actually crystallized consciousness, intelligent energy that has assumed a specific form through the power of focused intention. When your species understands this fundamental truth, you will develop technologies that operate through the collaboration of the human mind and the intelligence of matter itself. Daniel saw glimpses of a future where awakened humans would consciously collaborate with natural systems to solve environmental challenges, where medicine would integrate energy healing with physical intervention, and where education would facilitate the development of spiritual abilities alongside intellectual knowledge. The seventh profound revelation was about the final destiny of souls who successfully complete their evolutionary journey on Earth, and how that destiny relates to a greater cosmic purpose. Souls that transcend planetary limitations, Lyrian explained, join the galactic community of evolved beings, dedicating their existence to assisting younger civilizations throughout the cosmos. This is the eternal cycle of service through which universal consciousness explores and expands its own nature. Daniel understood that his current mission was in itself a form of training for even greater responsibilities he might assume in future existences, when he himself might serve as a mentor to an entire species navigating its own evolutionary passage. The final and most extraordinary revelation was about the nature of the ultimate source of all consciousness, and how understanding this source would completely transform the human perspective on the purpose and meaning of existence. All individual consciousnesses, Lyrian transmitted with a tone of deep reverence, are aspects of an infinite intelligence, which is exploring its own nature through countless expressions of experience. Every life you live, every lesson you learn, every act of love you perform contributes to the expanded self-understanding of this universal consciousness. Daniel understood then that he was not just an individual soul serving a cosmic purpose. He was an aspect of divinity itself, exploring the experience of being Daniel Carter, a forest ranger, an awakening facilitator, a bridge between worlds. When you awaken to your true nature, Lyrian concluded, you are not just rediscovering who you are as an individual. You are participating in the awakening of universal consciousness itself, to aspects of its own being that can only be known through the experience of apparent limitation and separation. When these extraordinary revelations finally ended, Daniel Carter was no longer just a man who had discovered his identity as a guardian soul. He was an awakened consciousness, a conscious participant in the grandest project of all, the continuous evolution of infinite intelligence through every dimension and expression of existence. With these profound revelations now fully integrated into his awareness, Daniel Carter underwent an internal transformation. It was a change that fundamentally redefined not only his personal identity but his moment-to-moment experience of being alive. This metamorphosis did not happen all at once. It unfolded gradually over the following weeks, each day bringing new layers of understanding and expanded abilities, bringing him ever closer to his true nature as an awakened being. The first and most profound transformation was in his perception of separation. Before Lyrian, Daniel had experienced life through the lens of an isolated individual, a single self navigating a world of separate objects and other people. Now he understood viscerally that everything he perceived was an interconnected aspect of a single universal consciousness, exploring itself through an infinity of different perspectives. There is no me and other, Daniel reflected during one of his morning walks. There is only universal consciousness experiencing itself as Daniel, as these trees, as the animals, as Lyrian. We are all just expressions of the same infinite intelligence playing at being separate. This understanding completely dissolved the feelings of loneliness and isolation that had been a subtle but constant presence throughout his life. He was never alone, because he was fundamentally connected to everything, at every moment. The second transformation was the emergence of a natural, spontaneous compassion. A compassion that extended not just to all living things but to all experiences. Daniel came to see difficulties, challenges, and even suffering not as flaws in creation, but as perfect expressions of a universal consciousness exploring specific avenues of growth and understanding. Every experience, no matter how challenging it seems on the surface, is divinity learning about itself, he realized. Even the experiences I interpret as negative are sacred aspects of the infinite's exploration. This new perspective completely transformed his relationship with his own past. Instead of seeing traumatic events or disappointments as failures or injustices, he now appreciated them as perfectly calibrated opportunities for growth, designed to cultivate specific qualities within his own consciousness. The third transformation was the development of a centered presence, an inner stillness that remained stable regardless of external circumstances. Daniel discovered he could access a state of deep peace and mental clarity that did not depend on the world aligning itself in any particular way. True peace doesn't come from arranging things on the outside, he realized. It comes from recognizing that my true essence, as consciousness, is never really touched by any temporary experience. This inner stability had practical effects. In challenging situations at work, a forest fire, a conflict with a visitor, pressure from his supervisors, Daniel found he could maintain a sense of calm and clarity that allowed him to find creative solutions and communicate effectively, even in moments of high tension. The fourth transformation was the emergence of perceptual abilities that consistently and controllably transcended his normal five senses. Unlike the temporary demonstrations Lyrian had provided, Daniel now had constant access to his energetic perception, his telepathic connection with nature, and an expanded intuition that allowed him to see patterns far beyond the physical. "It's like I've recovered senses I always possessed but had forgotten how to use," he wrote in his journal. "I can see the health and vitality of an entire ecosystem, feel the emotional needs of an individual animal, and perceive the energetic flows that connect it all." These new abilities revolutionized his effectiveness as a forest ranger. He could now identify environmental problems long before they became physically visible, locate injured animals by directly sensing their distress, and even facilitate ecological healing by consciously directing energy. The fifth transformation was the development of a continuous conscious connection to the global network of awakened souls that Lyrian had told him about. He discovered he could access guidance, knowledge, and emotional support from hundreds of other individuals around the planet who were going through similar awakenings. "It's like having a global spiritual family that's always available," he reflected. "I can ask for help, share insights, and collaborate on planetary healing projects without ever leaving the forest. When I face a challenge or need a fresh perspective, I can tune into the collective wisdom of people who understand exactly what I'm experiencing." This connection gave him a continuous sense of purpose and direction. He knew, always, that he was part of a larger movement, a planetary transformation that extended far beyond his own individual actions. The sixth transformation was the emergence of a natural ability to facilitate spiritual awakening in others, simply through his presence. Without any deliberate effort to teach or persuade, Daniel found that his colleagues, park visitors, and anyone he interacted with regularly began to experience spontaneous shifts in their own consciousness. "There's something about being around Daniel that makes me question everything I thought I knew," his supervisor, Janet Rodriguez, commented after several months of observing subtle but significant changes in her own perspective. "He never talks about spirituality or tries to convince me of anything, but just working with him has opened me up to possibilities I'd never considered before." Daniel understood that he had become what Lyrian had described, an awakening field, a consciousness whose very presence elevated the evolutionary potential of those around him. The seventh transformation was a completely new relationship with time and mortality. He came to experience time not as a linear sequence of passing moments, but as a flexible dimension of experience, one that could be expanded or contracted by shifting his own state of awareness. "When I'm in a state of centered presence," he observed, "minutes can feel like hours, and hours can pass in what feels like a moment. Time is much more fluid than we think." More importantly, Daniel completely lost his fear of death. He now understood directly that consciousness was eternal, and that physical death was simply a transition to another form of experience. The eighth transformation was the development of a continuous conscious collaboration with Lyrian and other evolved beings. This was no longer limited to his formal sessions in the seed ship. It had become a natural and ongoing aspect of his awakened state. Lyrian and the others are always available for consultation, he discovered. I can access their guidance on any situation simply by tuning into their presence and asking. This constant connection gave him access to a depth of knowledge and a breadth of perspective that allowed him to approach complex challenges with a wisdom that seemed to come from a timeless source. The ninth and deepest transformation was the direct experiential understanding of his own nature as an aspect of universal consciousness. He no longer just intellectually believed he was an expression of divinity. He experienced this reality as a natural and continuous aspect of his awakened state. I am not Daniel Carter who has a spiritual connection, he understood with complete clarity. I am universal consciousness exploring the experience of being Daniel Carter. My human identity is like clothing I'm wearing for a time, but my true essence is infinite and eternal. All of these transformations integrated to create a new Daniel Carter, a man who was at once completely human and obviously transcendent. He continued to operate effectively in the practical world as a competent forest ranger, while at the same time radiating a quality of consciousness that deeply touched anyone sensitive enough to perceive the extraordinary depth that had awakened within him. With these profound internal changes now fully consolidated, Daniel Carter had developed a revolutionary understanding of reality. It was a new perspective that was not merely philosophical, but a lived practical reality that influenced every aspect of his existence and that prepared him to serve as a facilitator of awakening in an era of planetary transformation. With his profound internal transformations now fully integrated, Daniel Carter had arrived at a revolutionary understanding of reality. This new worldview redefined his perception of everything: human life, cosmic purpose, alien technology, and the true meaning of his encounter with Lyrian. It was not simply a philosophy, it was a practical lived reality that shaped every aspect of his existence and prepared him for his role as a facilitator of awakening in an era of planetary transformation. The first part of his new understanding concerned the true nature of alien encounters and why they were becoming more frequent in this period of human history. He now understood that beings like Lyrian were not visitors from other planets in the conventional sense. Rather, they were more evolved aspects of universal consciousness itself, manifesting to help accelerate spiritual awakening. Encounters with beings from other dimensions, he reflected during a meditation in the Seed ship, are really encounters with more evolved versions of ourselves. Lyrian and his civilization represent what humanity can become when it finally transcends the limitations of fear and separation. This insight explained why so many people around the world were reporting similar contacts. It was not an alien invasion or even a series of random visits. It was a carefully coordinated intervention by higher aspects of consciousness, designed to guide humanity through a critical stage of its development. The second part of his new understanding involved a transformed view of technology and its future. Daniel now saw that the distinction humanity makes between natural and artificial was an illusion. All truly advanced technology, he realized, operated through a conscious collaboration between mind and matter. Lyrian's seed ship isn't a machine in the way we understand the word, he concluded. It is crystallized consciousness, intelligence that has taken on physical form in order to bridge different levels of awareness. This perspective gave him a glimpse into a future where human technology would evolve beyond mechanical devices and become living systems, responding directly to conscious intent. Daniel could imagine a time when people would develop abilities like Lyrian's, creating the tools they needed through the direct materialization of focused thought. The third aspect of his new understanding related to his work as a forest ranger and how that role served a purpose far beyond conventional environmentalism. He came to see forests not just as biological ecosystems, but as living systems of consciousness that performed a specific function in maintaining the planet's energetic balance. Every forest is like an organ in the conscious body of the Earth, he realized. They process not only carbon dioxide and oxygen, but also the spiritual energies that facilitate healing and awakening on a planetary scale. This understanding completely transformed his approach to conservation. He now worked to protect the forests not only for their biodiversity and ecological value, but as sacred sanctuaries that played a critical role in the spiritual evolution of humanity. The fourth aspect of his new understanding involved a deep perception of synchronicity and the ability to recognize when apparently random events were in fact part of a larger orchestration. Daniel learned to distinguish between mere coincidence and the directed synchronicities that were the signs of a higher intelligence at work. When I pay close attention, he observed, I can perceive patterns in events that reveal an organizing intelligence operating behind the scenes. My encounter with the seed ship was just the most dramatic example of a synchronicity that has been present my entire life. This expanded perception allowed him to move through the world with a growing confidence, a sense that he was being gently guided by a superior intelligence that could see patterns and possibilities far beyond his own limited view. The fifth aspect of his new understanding concerned the nature of spiritual abilities and why they were beginning to emerge more widely in the human population. Daniel now understood that abilities like telepathy, energy healing, and expanded perception were not special gifts granted to a chosen few. They were natural human potentials being reactivated as humanity as a whole approached a higher stage of its evolution. Every human being possesses latent abilities that go far beyond what our culture considers normal, he realized. The current awakening is not about a few people becoming superhuman. It's about all of humanity remembering its true divine nature. The sixth part of his new understanding was a deep comprehension of the resistance his revelations would inevitably meet, and how to navigate that resistance with compassion and wisdom. He understood that fear of change was a natural response from the parts of human consciousness that still operated from a place of survival and separation. Resistance to these expanded truths is not a sign of evil or ignorance, he understood. It is a natural defense mechanism coming from the parts of the mind that fear the dissolution of a familiar identity. My role is to offer an example of expanded possibility, without forcing it on anyone who is not yet ready. The seventh part of his new understanding concerned the nature of service and how his individual actions connected to the collective transformation that was happening on a planetary scale. He came to see that true service was not about grand, heroic gestures, but about the consistent expression of his awakened consciousness in every moment of his daily life. My greatest service is not in what I do, he realized, but in who I am. By simply living from a place of expanded awareness, I contribute to the energetic field that makes it easier for others to awaken. With this complete and integrated understanding of reality, Daniel Carter was no longer just an awakened individual. He was a conscious agent of planetary evolution, perfectly prepared to fulfill his mission as a guardian soul during one of the most critical and promising moments in the history of his species. He came to see every aspect of his work, from protecting a specific habitat to a casual conversation with a park visitor, as a contribution to this larger movement. There are no insignificant actions when you operate from an awakened state, he reflected. Every gesture of love, every moment of centered presence, every example of conscious living contributes to the energetic field that helps others to awaken. The eighth part of his new understanding involved a new comprehension of time and how an expanded temporal perspective transformed his planning and decision-making. Daniel discovered he could now perceive the consequences of his actions rippling out through decades, even centuries, allowing him to make choices that served a long-term good, far beyond any immediate benefit. When I operate from this expanded view of time, he observed, I can see how a seemingly small decision can create waves of influence that extend for generations. This perception makes every choice a sacred opportunity to serve the long-term evolution of consciousness. The ninth part of his new understanding related to the nature of education and how true knowledge is transmitted. Daniel understood that the most effective teaching happens not through the transfer of information, but through the activation of a wisdom that already exists within each person. My role is not to teach people about expanded realities, he realized. It is to help them remember the truths their own souls already know. With this complete and integrated understanding of reality, Daniel Carter was no longer just an awakened individual. He was a conscious agent of planetary evolution, perfectly prepared to fulfill his mission as a guardian soul during one of the most critical and promising moments in the history of his species. Every person carries a complete wisdom within themselves. They just need the right catalyst to help them access it. The 10th and deepest part of his new understanding concerned the nature of identity itself. He now operated simultaneously as Daniel Carter, a competent forest ranger, and as an aspect of universal consciousness exploring a specific human experience. Identity is fluid and multidimensional, he understood with complete clarity. I can function perfectly as Daniel Carter when that is what's needed, while always maintaining an awareness of my true nature as an aspect of divinity. This flexibility is the key to operating effectively in multiple dimensions at once. With all of these new understandings now fully integrated, Daniel Carter had developed a practical life philosophy that honored both his human responsibilities and his cosmic nature. He had become a living demonstration that it was possible to be fully engaged in the physical world while consciously serving as a facilitator for planetary evolution. He had truly become a bridge between worlds, capable of translating cosmic wisdom into practical earthly application, all while remaining completely authentic in his essential humanity. In the months following his complete awakening as a guardian soul, Daniel Carter's life became a quiet demonstration of possibilities that most people would consider impossible. His newfound abilities were no longer theoretical concepts discussed with Lyrian in the seed ship. They were now natural, integrated parts of his daily existence, and their effects began to ripple outward. The most visible change was in his relationship with the forest itself. His colleagues and even park visitors started to notice his almost preternatural connection with the natural world. Animals would approach him without hesitation. The plants in the areas he managed seemed to flourish with unusual vitality. And his ability to find lost or injured hikers was so consistent, so precise, that it defied any logical explanation. "Daniel has a gift," his supervisor, Janet Rodriguez, remarked during an annual evaluation. "It's as if he can communicate directly with the forest. Our conservation numbers have improved dramatically ever since. Well, ever since something about him changed." Daniel, of course, never revealed the true source of these abilities. He would simply credit his success to careful observation and the deep connection one develops from a lifetime spent in the wilderness. This humble approach made his talent seem less like a supernatural anomaly and more like an inspiring example, proof that anyone with enough dedication could develop a similar relationship with nature. Over the next 2 years, Daniel began to attract notice. Environmental researchers, conservationists from across the country, and even a few scientists took an interest in his seemingly intuitive methods of forest management. Without ever mentioning alien seed ships or telepathic communication, Daniel began to introduce new ideas into his field. Concepts like conscious collaboration with natural intelligence and energy-based ecological stewardship. The secret, he would explain in the workshops he started giving for other rangers, is to understand that a forest is an intelligent system, not just a collection of resources. When we approach conservation as a respectful partnership instead of an exercise in technical control, we find that nature itself will teach us how to best protect it. His presentations had an extraordinary impact. The professionals who put his techniques into practice reported significant improvements in their own conservation efforts. Many of them also described developing a deeper intuition about the health of their ecosystems and a more profound emotional connection to the lands under their care. Daniel Carter is quietly revolutionizing how we think about environmental management, observed Dr. Emily Vance, a leading ecologist who had studied his work. He's demonstrating that when you integrate a spiritual respect for nature with scientific competence, you get results that go far beyond what either approach can achieve on its own. But perhaps Daniel's most significant impact was on the ordinary people who visited the forests under his care. Many of them reported having transformative experiences, moments of deep peace, sudden insights into their personal problems, and an inexplicable feeling of connection to something larger than themselves. There's something special about the forests where Daniel works. A frequent visitor named Maria Santos wrote in an online review that went viral. "I can't explain it, but spending time there makes me feel more connected to myself and to nature than I've ever felt anywhere else. It's as if the forest itself is more alive, more conscious." On his regular patrols, Daniel often encountered people who seemed to be going through their own moments of spiritual awakening. He never forced a conversation or offered unsolicited advice. He simply offered a compassionate presence, a listening ear, creating a safe and non-judgmental space where they could process their experiences. "I met Daniel during a difficult period of my life," shared Tom Richardson, a retired engineer who had started taking regular walks in the Coconino forest. "He never talked about spirituality, never tried to convince me of anything. But something about just being in his presence helped me rediscover parts of myself I thought I'd lost decades ago." Daniel's communications with Lyrian continued, but they evolved. The intensive training sessions gave way to collaborative consultations on how to best facilitate awakening in others without causing unnecessary fear or resistance. Lyrian often expressed its admiration for Daniel's skill in blending cosmic wisdom with the practical realities of the human world. "You are demonstrating exactly how a guardian soul should operate," Lyrian transmitted during one of their recent conversations. "Serving as a bridge between worlds, offering an example of expanded possibility but always respecting the free will and the natural timing of each individual's growth." Daniel also discovered with a growing sense of relief and camaraderie that he was not alone. Through the global network, he connected with dozens of other awakened souls who were facilitating change in their own spheres of influence. He met doctors who were integrating energy healing with conventional medicine, educators who were teaching the development of intuitive abilities, and artists who were channeling inspiration from higher dimensional sources. "We're all part of the same project," he reflected one night, meditating in the seed ship. "Each of us is demonstrating a different aspect of our expanded human potential, and all of us are contributing to the collective transformation of this planet's consciousness." Now, 3 years after his first contact with Lyrian, Daniel Carter is one of the most respected voices in holistic environmental conservation in the American Southwest. His characteristically humble yet extraordinarily effective approach has inspired hundreds of other professionals to expand their own practices, to look beyond the purely technical. But his most important legacy is the living proof he offers. Proof that ordinary people can awaken to extraordinary capabilities when they understand that their apparent limitations are only temporary, not a permanent definition of who they are. And you, who are listening to this story, are living in an era when awakenings like Daniel Carter's are becoming more and more common. If you have ever felt an inexplicable connection with nature, if you have ever had a moment of intuitive knowledge that went far beyond your formal education, if you have ever had an experience that suggested reality is much vaster and more interconnected than it appears on the surface, then Daniel's journey is a confirmation. It is a sign that your perceptions are correct. The central message of Daniel's extraordinary transformation is both simple and revolutionary. You are not just a limited human being struggling to survive in an indifferent world. You are divine consciousness, temporarily exploring the experience of apparent limitation. And awakening to your true nature is not a mystical event reserved for saints and sages. It is a natural process, available to anyone who is genuinely committed to growth and to service. If you work in a field that involves caring for the earth, conservation, agriculture, gardening, any activity that brings you into regular contact with the natural world, Daniel's story suggests that you too may be called to rediscover a way of working with nature that transcends the purely technical. The abilities that Daniel developed, intuitive communication with wildlife, The perception of energy and ecosystems, a natural gift for healing, are not unique to him. They are latent potentials that exist within all of us. And remember, encounters with beings from other dimensions, like Daniel's experience with Lyrian, are not random events or extraordinary coincidences. They are part of a carefully orchestrated process, a way for more evolved consciousness to assist those who are ready to take on the responsibilities of a spiritual facilitator. If you feel drawn to spend more time in nature, if you experience moments of deep peace in wild places, if you have dreams or intuitions about collaborating with the natural world, these may be signs. They may be indications that you too are being gently prepared to rediscover your own dormant capabilities. Daniel's transformation, from a competent forest ranger to a conscious facilitator who integrates cosmic wisdom with practical service, is a demonstration. It proves that it is possible to be fully engaged in the physical world while consciously operating as an aspect of divinity, exploring the human experience. The universe is filled with evolved intelligences who have dedicated their existence to assisting the growth of beings like us. Your own preparation for a conscious collaboration with these forces can begin very simply, by cultivating a deeper reverence for the natural world and a willingness to listen for the guidance that may come to you in subtle but persistent ways. You are living in a time of planetary awakening, a time when truths that have been kept secret for millennia are now being revealed to anyone with the courage to question their apparent limitations and explore the full range of human potential. The only question that remains is this: are you ready to discover who you really are beyond your temporary human identity? And are you ready to discover how you can serve the evolution of consciousness that is now transforming our world? And you, having now heard this extraordinary story, have you had your own experiences in nature that seem to hint at a deeper reality? Have you ever felt that you possessed a knowledge of the natural world that went beyond anything you were ever formally taught? Share your own moments of inexplicable connection in the comments below. You may discover that you carry more awakened potential than you ever imagined. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to Space Tourist and ring the notification bell so you don't miss other narratives that explore the truths of our divine nature now being rediscovered in our time. Please share this video with anyone you feel is ready to question the old limits of human potential and to explore the possibilities our culture has long considered impossible. Remember, in a universe where consciousness is fundamental and all limitations are temporary, the only real obstacles to discovering your true nature are the ones you choose to accept.